12 years ago, the Liberals, the NDP, and Bloc Québécois signed a pact to govern Canada as a coalition. Today, with the addition of the Greens, that is precisely what we have. There isn't a choice between the Liberals, the NDP, the Greens, and the Bloc Québécois. They're all the same, and they're all part of the problem. For years, the NDP, Greens, and the Bloc have helped Justin Trudeau cover up his scandals. None of them have a plan to get Canada out of debt. They love spending your hard-earned money just as much as Mr. Trudeau does. Il n'y a pas de différence entre les libéraux, le Bloc, l'NPD et les Verts. Ils sont tous pareils. Ils font tous partie du même problème. Depuis des années, le Bloc, l'NPD et les Verts aident Justin Trudeau à camoufler ces scandales. Aucune n'a de plan pour faire en sorte que le Canada ne soit plus endetté. Il aime dépenser votre argent durement gagné autant que M. Trudeau. None of them are concerned that inflation is suddenly a problem in our country after 40 years. They're all more concerned with image than with creating jobs. And because of them, COVID-19 has made the rich richer and the poor poorer. The timing of this election is reckless. At a time when the government should be singularly focused on stopping the Delta variant and fighting the fourth wave, the Liberals just care about themselves. But as poorly timed as this election is, it presents Canadians with an important choice about our future. On one hand, the Liberals, NDP, Bloc and Greens, with their collective failure to focus on a plan for Canada's recovery after the pandemic. Their failure to plan for jobs, or really anything. And on the other hand, Canada's Conservatives, who will focus relentlessly on creating jobs, increasing wages, and getting Canada's economy back on track as quickly as possible. Deux choix s'offrent à vous. D'un côté, les libéraux, le Bloc, le NPD et les Verts n'ont pas de plan pour assurer la reprise économique après la pandémie. Pas de plan pour l'emploi, rien du tout. Et de l'autre, les conservateurs vont créer des emplois, augmenter les salaires, rétablir l'économie et équilibrer les finances publiques. This election is about who you think can get us out of the recession and rebuild the economy. Who do you think can secure the future for all Canadians? After the last 18 months, we're all exhausted and frustrated by the pandemic. My wife, Rebecca, and I caught COVID-19 last year. I understand the fears, the dangers of this virus firsthand, and a fourth wave driven by the Delta variant worries me deeply. But 4 more years of Justin Trudeau worries me even more. It's time for a Prime Minister who values results more than image, who is a hard worker, and who will unite Canadians, not divide them. This pandemic will pass. But the Liberals, NDP, Bloc and Greens have no plan for the recovery of our great country. Only the Conservatives, with Canada's recovery plan, will get Canada back on track. Today, I am proud to unveil our detailed plan, Canada's recovery plan. We will secure jobs by recovering the 1 million jobs lost during the pandemic and more in 1 year. We will secure accountability by enacting a new anti-corruption law to clean up the mess in Ottawa. Aujourd'hui, je suis fier de présenter le plan de rétablissement du Canada. On va agir pour les emplois en récupérant en une année le million d'emplois perdus pendant la pandémie. On va agir pour l'intégrité en adoptant une nouvelle loi anti-corruption pour faire le ménage à Ottawa. We will secure mental health by delivering our Canada Mental Health Action Plan. We will secure the country by building capacity here at home to handle any future pandemic or crisis. And we will secure our economy by balancing the budget over the course of the next decade. I was 18 years old when I joined the military to serve Canada. Today, 30 years later, I stand before you renewed in my patriotism, renewed in my optimism. I believe that Canada is a welcoming country. I believe that a Prime Minister must represent all Canadians, regardless of age, faith, color, background, gender, or sexual orientation. I believe that Canada must be a country where anyone can live a fulfilling and prosperous life. And most importantly, I believe Canada's best days are on the horizon. In this election, Canadians have two choices. More of the same, with millions of Canadians getting left behind, or a real plan for recovery. Canada's recovery plan will get Canada surging in the right direction. Canada's recovery plan will ensure no Canadian is left behind. Canada's recovery plan will secure the future for all Canadians. Le plan de rétablissement du Canada va remettre le pays sur les rails. Le plan de rétablissement du Canada va s'assurer qu'aucun Canadien n'est laissé pour compte. Le plan de rétablissement du Canada va agir pour l'avenir de tous les Canadiens. Securing the future of this great country begins today with Canada's recovery plan. Thank you. Je vous remercie. Who wants a copy of the plan? And I'm happy to answer your questions.
We will now take questions. Nous allons maintenant prendre des questions.
Good morning, Mr. O'Toole. Travis Stanrash, CBC News. My first question is on vaccines. Do you believe rapid tests are suitable replacements for mandatory vaccination? And have you consulted doctors and public health officials on that stance?
Well, let me repeat. Vaccines are a critical tool to fight the pandemic. They're safe and effective for use, and Canada's Conservatives have been fighting for over a year for better and swifter access to vaccines. We do feel that Canadians have the right to make their own health care decisions, and we encourage people to get vaccinated, but we also have to make sure we have the tools to protect all Canadians from some people that will not be vaccinated. Rapid testing, masks, distancing, all the tools, but rapid testing in particular on a daily basis can be very effective to make sure we reduce the spread. We have a reasonable and effective approach that respects Canadians and keeps people safe. It's not the time to divide, it's the time to work together to fight COVID-19 together. Les vaccins sont efficaces et sécuritaires. J'encourage tous les Canadiens, tous les Québécois de se faire vacciner et on doit utiliser tous les outils dans la lutte contre le COVID-19. On va respecter les décisions des Canadiens en ce qui concerne leur santé. J'encourage les vaccins, mais on doit utiliser les tests de dépistage rapide, des masques et des autres mesures pour les Canadiens qui ne sont pas été vaccinés.
On Afghanistan, Mr. O'Toole, do you think Canada should follow the U.S. lead and not recognize the Taliban government? And with respect to aid, military and development, do you think it should be suspended in light of recent events?
The images out of Afghanistan are hard to watch. They're heartbreaking. As I said yesterday, my thoughts go out to the women and girls in that country that are going to be facing the subjugation of the Taliban again. And my heart also goes out to military families and veterans, many of whom gave the ultimate sacrifice there or were injured in Afghanistan and hate to see the country in chaos and back in the hands of the Taliban. Mr. Trudeau knew for 6 months that the U.S. were going to withdraw and left some of the interpreters and contractors that were still there. That's unacceptable. We have to work with our allies to provide as much aid, as much humanitarian assistance as possible. That would be a priority for me as Prime Minister. On doit travailler en étroite collaboration avec nos alliés sur la triste situation sur le terrain en Afghanistan. C'était très triste pour les familles militaires, nos anciens combattants. Mes pensées sont avec les familles militaires à travers le pays et avec les filles et les femmes en Afghanistan avec l'horrible acte par le Taliban. Et on doit donner l'aide et assistance pour aider les gens là-bas.
Next question.
Andrew Lawton, True North. In October, Albertans will be voting in a referendum on whether to support amending the Constitution on equalization. If you are the Prime Minister in October and Albertans vote in favor of that, will you commit to engaging with Alberta and engaging on that referendum question?
After 6 years of Mr. Trudeau, our country's more divided than it's ever been in my lifetime. I met a veteran in Nisku, Alberta, who served the country for almost 30 years and is now giving up on the country because of what Mr. Trudeau has done to his province in Alberta. So I'll always work to heal national unity divides. I'll always respect provincial jurisdiction, and I respect provinces that want to bring a question to their citizens. That is their right. I respect provinces that want to act within the Constitution to make life better, to support people at risk, to protect the French language in Quebec. So I will be there. I will work closely with all premiers. And Canada's recovery plan, launched official today, is about getting people back to work in all sectors, including energy in Alberta. Our economic recovery depends on a recovery in all sectors of the economy and in all regions of the country.
In your leadership platform last year, you committed to privatizing CBC News Network, CBC English TV, and ultimately ending funding to CBC Digital. In this platform, however, you're only committing to review, quote, assessing the viability of refocusing, unquote. Help me understand that. Will you be fulfilling your leadership pledge to privatize and defund those CBC departments in a first mandate?
I think it's unfair for private sector media outlets that are struggling to transition to digital, that are struggling to gain advertising revenue, to see the state competing against them, particularly in areas of digital, where the CBC increases have actually made it harder for the private sector. And then Mr. Trudeau creates a media bailout fund to deal with some of the challenges he's caused. So it is the time to modernize. It is the time to respect the public interest mandate done by CBC in terms of radio being non-commercial. The service to rural communities, French language services are critical, and Indigenous languages are critical as well. But we are going to review where there is competition with the private sector. We need a competitive and successful private sector in all media, and we need to balance the playing field with the American web giants, but without attacking Canadians' liberties on social media.
Abigail Beeman, Global News. Your platform promises the most spending and investment right up front, and then also to balance the budget in 10 years. Can you guarantee that after those first few years, there won't be cuts coming to Canadians?
We want to help Canadians. We want to help get all people back to work in all sectors and in all regions. We want to help the most highly affected. That's been a big miss with Mr. Trudeau. There are thousands of small and medium-sized businesses in hospitality, tourism, restaurants hanging on by a thread. So our plan will secure those jobs, help them thrive, and that will help us get a growing economy. We want to make sure we help some of the people hit hard, some of the vulnerable. We want to tackle mental health. So we have a comprehensive plan. It's with the PBO for costing right now, and we need to help people as we secure the future. And our plan to balance the budget over the course of 10 years, by the decade, is fair so that we can help people get back on their feet.
On Afghanistan, the Liberal government committed to resettling 20,000 people. I'm wondering if you believe that that's the right number. Should it be higher? And I'm wondering if you were in government, what you would be doing specifically to help people come to Canada, given the situation on the ground.
As I said, the situation on the ground is heartbreaking. To see people clamoring onto aircraft, running after aircraft, it's heartbreaking. It shows the turmoil there. And the Trudeau government knew that was coming. They had 6 months at least that the Biden administration was pulling out. And the Trudeau government did nothing, even to secure folks that had worked at the embassy, interpreters that our caucus and even myself have been advocating for 5 years. Like everything, Mr. Trudeau leaves everything to the last minute, hopes other people will look after the real leadership that is required in a prime minister. I will make sure that we work with our allies to provide aid, to provide support, and anyone that's at risk because they help serve with our men and women in your uniform or our diplomats or our aid workers. We need to have their back, and I will have their back as Prime Minister.
Next question.
Hey, Glenn McGregor, CTV News. Mr. O'Toole, I'd like you to elaborate on that point a little bit. If you were Prime Minister today, what would you be doing to help get those people out of Afghanistan? Would you send more Canadian Forces members in there? Would you, for example, waive some of the screening process in order to get people out faster? What exactly would you be doing to help this situation?
Well, first, Glenn, I've worked on this for 5 years. In fact, we got one Afghan interpreter that served with our forces back under John McCallum, and Mr. Trudeau fired him, and his subsequent ministers were disastrous. We need action. So I will be a Prime Minister that will act. And as I said, anybody that is at risk from the Taliban, and we see the turmoil in that country, it's heartbreaking. Anyone that's at risk because they were supporting our efforts there in the military and aid and diplomacy, we need to get them back. And Mr. Trudeau has squandered 6 years, squandered the last 6 months when we knew the U.S. pullout was coming.
I want to ask you about your daycare policy. Your document you released today proposes to effectively scrap the $10 a day daycare deals that the Liberal government has forged with the provinces. Those programs have been very popular in Quebec, and you replace it with a tax credit so that people would families would have to put up as much as some places over $2,000 a month per child, and then at tax time get the money back. Is that really the best way to go? Could you explain the thinking there?
We're going to help all parents, immediately, not some 6 years from now. Parents know what's best, particularly with the flexibility needed for families coming out of the pandemic and with shift work and other things. We're going to help all families, and lower income families will have 75% of the costs covered. So we're going to empower families to make their decisions, and we're going to support all families immediately. I think it's an approach that is not only fair, it gives immediate help, not more liberal promises that will never come. On doit aider toutes les familles canadiennes et on va avoir une approche comme ça. C'est dans notre plan pour le rétablissement du Canada. On va donner plus d'assistance pour les familles plus vulnérables. On va payer 75% de leur coût pour la garderie. Et on va aider toutes les familles canadiennes et québécoises immédiatement. Pas une promesse pour un autre 5 ou 6 ans. On doit aider toutes les familles maintenant. On doit respecter les familles et leurs décisions.
Next question.
Chris Seller from the National Post. You say you've been working on this problem of trying to help our friends in Afghanistan for months. I'm wondering, what do you attribute this painfully slow progress to? Is it a lack of will? Is it a lack of intelligence in the government, in the bureaucracy? What do you think are the root problems here?
A lack of leadership by Mr. Trudeau, and he sets that tone for his ministers. As I said, this is heartbreaking for veterans. I've been hearing from veterans in recent weeks, some of whom feel they've left part of themselves in that country. They want to make sure interpreters and contractors are taken care of. I personally handed Minister Hussein a letter from someone that was at risk that came to me from a veteran. Nothing happened. Even interpreters that served with Minister Sajan, completely forgotten. There's no leadership. As I said, we have a Prime Minister and a Liberal government that is very good at scripted announcements and photo ops. They never deliver. And it's heartbreaking to see what's happening in Afghanistan. And military families, it's our longest mission. The Afghanistan war was the longest Canadian Armed Forces mission. There is a sense of heartbreak. And so we will act. We will not just talk. We will act. And I think we need to help anyone that's at risk because they help support Canada.
Was the mission worth it, do you think?
It is always worth it to stand up for dignity of other people. It is always worth it to stand by our values at home and abroad. Canada is the country of Vimy Ridge, of Juno Beach, and of Kandahar. And I think all Canadians want us to play a role in humanitarian assistance right now. Aid, we have been a large aid supporter. But the failure of leadership by Mr. Trudeau, particularly in the last 6 months, when veterans have been reaching out, NGOs, there's other groups that are worried about people on the ground there. There's been no action until some photo ops before the election and a 3-day application process. It's unacceptable. Canadians deserve leadership. Canadians deserve a plan. Our plan for the recovery is here, and my track record leading in uniform in the private sector in government is exactly what we need. Les Canadiens et Canadiennes méritent un vrai leader expérimenté et avec un plan. On doit aider les interpréteurs et les gens sur le terrain en Afghanistan immédiatement. Malheureusement, M. Trudeau a fait rien 6 mois avant la triste situation sur le terrain maintenant. Nous sommes un pays fort. On doit se tenir debout pour nos valeurs chez nous et à travers le monde, à côté de nos alliés. Nous sommes le pays de Vimy Ridge, la crête de Vimy et aussi de Kandahar. Et on doit aider les Afghans maintenant.
Next question.
Ian Bailey, Globe and Mail. Mr. O'Toole, what are you going to say to voters who look at the last page of the platform and see that this is not being costed by the PBO? Are you concerned about any surprises coming once that group takes a look at this and tries to come up with some figures?
It is being costed by the PBO right now, Ian. Mr. Trudeau called a snap election. We have been engaging with thousands of Canadians, putting forward Canada's recovery plan, our 5-point plan to secure the future. And we know it will kickstart an economic recovery for all Canadians in all parts of the country. And as soon as we could get it to the PBO for costing, we did. It wasn't available prior to an election. And we will be releasing an updated edition with the PBO's costing. As I said, our 5-point plan will get us back to balance over the course of the next decade, but we're going to help get the country back on its feet.
And Quebec is a key electoral battleground in this election. The Premier there has been very happy with the Liberal child care plan. Do you think you're taking a risk by promising to scrap it all?
I have a lot of respect for Premier Legault. We've had good meetings on a range of subjects. I've appreciated his leadership throughout the pandemic. Quebec has long had a program there. We will always respect provincial jurisdiction. Our approach will also help all families across the country, including in Quebec. Right now, when we form government, it will help all families and it will respect the decisions of families and help the less fortunate.
En français, s'il vous plaît.
J'ai beaucoup de respect pour Premier ministre Legault, particulièrement son leadership pendant la pandémie. Je vais toujours respecter les chambres des compétences des provinces, incluant le système de la garderie au Québec. Ça fonctionne très bien là-bas et je vais travailler avec toutes les provinces sur les enjeux importants pour les familles et je vais aider toutes les familles québécoises avec notre programme et on va cibler l'assistance pour les familles les plus vulnérables.
Prochaine question.
Oui, bonjour, Laurence Martin de Radio-Canada. Vous avez émis un communiqué hier soir pour dire que, pour les fonctionnaires fédéraux, ceux qui ne sont pas vaccinés, vous demanderiez à ce qu'ils passent un test quotidien de COVID. J'aimerais savoir comment est-ce que ça va fonctionner concrètement et surtout qui va payer pour ça. Est-ce que ce serait les fonctionnaires eux-mêmes ou ce serait le gouvernement?
Le gouvernement. Comme j'ai dit, les vaccins sont très importants, c'est sécuritaire et efficace. Et j'encourage tous les Canadiens et Québécois de se faire vacciner. Mais c'est possible d'utiliser les tests de dépistage rapides pour les fonctionnaires fédéraux qui ne sont pas été vaccinés. Et je vais avoir une approche comme ça. On a besoin plus de tests rapides pour la pandémie. Je préfère les tests de dépistage rapides fabriqués chez nous et pas en Chine. Et on va avoir une approche de leadership sur les tests de dépistage rapides. Et on doit avoir une approche raisonnable et équilibrée tout en respectant les décisions des Québécois sur leur propre santé.
Mais est-ce que vous pensez que c'est raisonnable que les contribuables qui se sont fait vacciner en majorité paient pour les tests des gens qui n'ont pas voulu se faire vacciner?
C'est raisonnable parce qu'on doit travailler ensemble. Ce n'est pas le temps pour la division, ce n'est pas le temps pour une élection en pleine d'une quatrième vague d'une pandémie. C'était la décision du Premier ministre Trudeau. C'était inapproprié d'avoir un programme pour le Charity We Charity pendant une pandémie. On a un plan pour le rétablissement du Canada après la pandémie. On a un plan pour les tests de dépistage, des vaccins, des outils. Et c'est très important pour le gouvernement fédéral d'avoir une approche de leadership. Et je vais être un rassembleur, pas un diviseur comme M. Trudeau.
This will be the last question. Ce sera la dernière question.
Hello, Heather Schofield from the Toronto Star. Your plan seems to be based on 3% growth over the long term, and that's been extremely difficult for any Western country to achieve, pandemic aside, obviously. So I'm wondering what happens if you're not able to obtain that 3%, given that it's such an ambitious target.
We've chosen an appropriate target based on a very ambitious set of economic development policies. As I've said, our first pillar, 1 million jobs in 1 year, will help recover the jobs lost in the pandemic and also get sectors of our economy surging. We need to be proud of what we produce in our country again: energy, softwood lumber, minerals. We need to get steel and aluminum better deals and not let China abuse international trade laws. And in Waterloo last week, I announced a very, very intense program for innovation in Canada, using Patent Box, using flow-through shares, many of which have been advocated by leading organizations, making sure that we can create more here in Canada. So we're confident we will attain those. But as a responsible government, we will always make sure we're transparent with Canadians, and we're making sure we put a recovery plan forward, and that we're never again unprepared for a crisis or running massive deficits in good times like Mr. Trudeau.
And just on your child care plan, there is, I can understand how you're but through a tax credit, you're helping with affordability. But how do you address the supply issues and the labor participation issues for women in the workplace, and also the fact that so many caregivers are underpaid?
We have to have more flexibility, more options, and more immediate help for all families. That's what our plan does. We're going to help all families immediately. And some of the lower income levels will actually get 75% of costs covered. And it will also fit the needs of people that are on shift or non-traditional hours. We need to give parents as much flexibility as possible. We will look to parents to make the best decisions, and our plan is very ambitious because we do need to help families get back on their feet. We do need to see the losses for women in the workforce regained. This will help do it. Also, our pillar on the 1 million jobs, helping the highly impacted sectors like hospitality, travel, tourism, many of which run by female entrepreneurs. I've met with those groups. So we want to help all Canadians, and this plan will do that. On doit aider toutes les familles canadiennes, toutes les familles québécoises, et on doit aider les secteurs les plus touchés par la pandémie, comme les restaurants, l'hôtellerie, les autres. Il y a plusieurs des femmes qui sont des femmes d'affaires dans les secteurs comme ça. Et avec notre programme pour la garderie, on va aider toutes les familles immédiatement. Et c'est un plan juste. Et avec une relance économique, on va avoir une reprise pour toutes les familles canadiennes.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup.